Hey everyone, thank you for checking out our first podcast. My name is Mitchell,
I'm Samantha.
and we are coming from the Southeastern University College of Allopathic Medicine. We had an idea to start a podcast. We've never really done one before. We kind of wanted to just outline a lot of different things about our experience here at the school, and we thought a great first episode would be doing just that. We're in our fourth year. We're deep in the interview season right now, and we thought we would just take this time to kind of reflect on our experience here as fourth years at a charter class.
And I think that's probably the most interesting part of today's show is going to be that we are a charter class, and we're going to be able to walk you through years 1 through 4 and just tell you about our experiences as they were.
Yeah, so we made a little outline just to keep things organized. We don't want to make this super formal. The first thing we wanted to talk about is just the school in general, what it is. Not many people have heard of our specific program. So we're at Southeastern University in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. It's technically in Davie, Florida, which is a smaller town west of Fort Lauderdale. Our school has had a DO program for a few decades now. It's pretty well known in Florida, at least, the Nova DO program. And then a few years ago, starting in 2018, we started an MD program, and we are both part of the charter class here. We now have a full range of classes. We're fourth years, and we have first years now. So we have each year here. So it's grown quite a bit since we've been here.
And I think one of the misconceptions that at least I've been encountering on the residency interview trail, and I don't know about you, Mitch, but people always ask, how are the classes set up? Are you in class with your DO colleagues? We're not. Actually, we're a very small class. There's only 50 per class. We have a different curriculum. It's called PBL, stands for problem-based learning, and we learn in small groups instead of your traditional lecture format. So we'll be in small groups, like 6 to 8 of us per group, and then we work through cases, and that's the main brunt of our learning.
Yeah, and I had known that like some schools, I believe Michigan State has not a combined program, but they have both MD and DO. I always thought maybe they would share classes at least. Here, we don't share any classes. I know we see them quite a bit on our clinical rotations. We'll work on teams with the DO students and schools that are around the area. We'll just share hospitals with. But as far as our curriculums, they don't really overlap at all.
And it's interesting, too, when we first came to campus, I think the most noticeable thing was that the dress code.
Yeah.
It was different.
It was definitely different. At Nova, pretty much every school has their own scrub color, whether it's, I think the DOs are light blue, there's like green for pharmacy, I believe. There's purple, black, a lot of different colors because Nova has a lot of different health professions here. Even the building we're in is called the Health Professions Division. There's probably close to like 10 programs, I feel like. But our dress code is business professional or business casual. So we kind of stick out like a sore thumb, but I think people have kind of just gotten used to it and it doesn't really matter anymore. We've kind of embraced the polo and khakis.
I think we had the first ever of its kind combined white coat ceremony. In the history of white coat ceremonies in the world, ours was the first of its kind. We actually had the president of the AAMC and the president of the AOA come and speak at the ceremony. And that was the only time we did like an official school-sponsored event together, the two different programs.
Yeah, it was definitely a cool day. But after that day, I mean, we're cool with the DO students. I'm friends with tons of them. And, we meet them on the clinical rotations, like I said. But beyond that first day, it was really a separate journey for us.
And we're going to tell you about that journey.
Yeah, so one of the things we wanted to talk about was kind of what appealed to us and what brought us to this school in the first place. I know that's going back like almost 4 years at this point, but what kind of appealed you to come to this school back in 2018?
You know what? It's funny you say 4 years ago because my interview was exactly 4 years ago, and well, maybe a little bit longer. It was done January 12th. 2018.
I don't remember my exact day. I feel like it was January 3rd or something, like maybe the 5th. And I think I got my acceptance, I think I got on January 28th. Maybe I'm wrong.
Wow, that's a quick turnaround.
But it was definitely January. It was about a month after, I think.
Wow, why don't you brag about it?
I know we weren't on the same day. I know I had 2 people that were in our class that were on my interview day.
I did too. I had a few of my classmates were at my interview day. But my interview day, it was January 12th, 2018, 4 years ago. And I remember it like it was yesterday. I really do. It was probably the best. So when I went on my interviews for med school, I ranked based off of what they provided for lunch. And this is very important, right? Some places would just give you a box with a sandwich in it. And then other places like NSU MD, we had a taco bar. Did you guys have the same taco bar?
We did, and my favorite part about the interview day, when you mentioned that, I thought about this, was they have these little triangles that were like cinnamon sugar triangles. I mean, it was really the highlight of my day. Jamie Reed, one of our admissions coordinators, she was there. She was like my favorite person. So like she was one of the highlights of my day, but like the taco bar with the cinnamon twist or the cinnamon triangle specifically was one of the main reasons I came here.
I would agree with you. I had the cinnamon twist after I had my main tacos, and they were delicious. I think I had about a full plate of them. I didn't care. I know I was at a med school interview and you should care about those sorts of things, but I was going in. I had a full plate. And it was an MMI. That's the kind of interview we had. Did you guys have the same?
Yeah, we all had the same interviews, I'm sure.
And the thing that stuck out to me the most was this idea of being a member of a charter class. Knowing that it would be kind of a once-in-a-lifetime thing, and we would always have this impact, a lasting sort of impact on the mold of the personality of the program. So they sold me on that. And the small class size, I think, was the biggest sell for me. 50 students.
Yeah, I remember, I don't even know if I was considering medical school yet. I think I had just started college at UCF or sometime shortly after, maybe 2012, 2013. And UCF, which is the University of Central Florida, they had just started their medical school. And I remember seeing they had a charter class, and I thought that was just so cool, like being what it would be like to be part of the charter class at medical school. So when I had that opportunity to interview here, I was super pumped, and eventually got accepted. And it was kind of a no-brainer for me to stay in Florida near my family while like being, it really is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to go to a new medical school. So I was really stoked about it. And my interview day was great. Everyone was very relaxed. Jamie and like Dean Pritchett and the whole team were just super inviting, super welcoming, very down to earth. And I got along with the people I interviewed with. The MMI was kind of stressful. I think I did pretty well, except for one station I absolutely bombed, and I thought that was it. It was really tough questions. Obviously, I can't say specifics or anything, but it was one station stood out, and I thought that was it. But yeah, once I got that acceptance, I remember I was driving to have lunch with my wife at her work one time. I was just off for that day. And I remember I was at a red light and I looked down at my phone because it went off, and I saw the acceptance, and I opened it really quick and I called my wife, and I think I was like crying. First time I'd cried in forever, but it was a good experience. And I had been accepted to another medical school, but it was out of state. And it was somewhere I was happy to go, but it wasn't anything like, staying in Florida and going to a charter class.
Man, you cried?
I did cry. For sure I cried.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I think differently of you now.
Thank you.
More respect, actually.
Okay, thank you.
When I got in, I remember I chalked it up that I thought I blew the interview. I'm not from Florida. I had moved here from Colorado, so I was in Colorado prior to coming out here for med school. And my interview date had coincided with my annual Disney World trip.
Okay.
And so I was at Disney World the night before. I was there pretty late. We were there till like 3 a.m. Then we drove the 3-4 hours it took to get down here. And I slept for 45 minutes at that unsavory Holiday Inn on Davie Road. I just had to cocoon myself into like a blanket because it was kind of dirty. You know which one I'm talking about, the one next to the Waffle House.
Yeah, shots fired at Holiday Inn.
Sorry. So I'd showed up. I didn't have much sleep, but I figured, this is going to be fun. And I thought the MMI was actually pretty fun.
It was fun.
So much to the point where after one station, Dean Pritchett was walking by and I said, hey, this is pretty fun. And he walked by and he said, well, we'll see how fun it gets when you get to committee. And I was like, oh. Man.
That's such a Dean Pritchett thing to say.
I know, right?
Like biting humor, like very, very nice, but at the same time, just kind of savage.
But I didn't know. Like I thought, oh man, I just blew it. And I figured, okay, I blew it. And then the tour bus left without me for the day because I was too caught up telling two of our deans, who I didn't know were deans at the time, about the previous night at Disney World. And then I looked around, everybody was gone. And then Jamie had to come back and get me. And I was like, okay, I blew that one, but it's fine. We'll see how it goes. But then I got the acceptance on Valentine's Day, actually. I was working at my job at CU as a scribe, and as we were walking into a room, I got the email. It was right when Gmail started to divide your emails into social, promotions, and primary inbox.
I remember that, and like you would miss some stuff.
Mine was in promotions.
That's really cool of them.
Yeah, it was a constant contact
oh my gosh.
email, so it ended up in promotions. And they just said dear and then my last name. And I was like, oh, maybe they messed up.
Mm-hmm.
But I got accepted. And you remember the little video attached?
I do.
It was a moving video.
Yep.
Is that what made you cry?
I don't know if it was the video specifically, but I think that added to it. And, you know, it's just a really simple video. It's just congratulations.
With Dean Pritchett.
Yep, congratulations.
He's the face.
Yeah, so I remember, no, the video definitely added to the excitement.
Yeah, the video was cool. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that.
Yeah. So what do you kind of started to touch on it, but what was it like moving? I know you said you're from Colorado. What was it like moving down to Southeast Florida for you?
So for me, like my husband and I had been living in Colorado for about 5 years at that point, but I'm originally from Reno, Nevada, which is much different than Florida. But I had lived in a few places since then. I lived in Texas, actually lived in Naples for 4 years down here in Florida, but on the other side. So moving down to this part of Florida, I guess the east coast of South Florida, which is known as South Florida, it was a long drive. We drove down here with 3 cats in the car, and we moved here. It was different. The humidity was something I had to get used to.
Yeah, I feel like maybe you would have been more used to it since you had been in Naples before. You know, it's not like a brand new thing for you. I was coming from Orlando, obviously. Sam and I are friends, so like we know this stuff about each other already. But just for some context,
friends.
I was coming from Orlando. I hadn't really I've been to Miami for like a football game once before and maybe for something else, but I hadn't really been in South Florida for an extended period of time. So once I moved down here, it just felt like I was just a little bit further away drive. You know, when I went to UCF, I was about 45 minutes, an hour away from home. Didn't really feel much different. It was just like an extra couple hours on the turnpike. So I warmed up to it pretty quick. I guess it was different living in a small town in Central Florida, about 45 minutes from Orlando, then moving down here near Fort Lauderdale and especially Miami, just a lot more people, definitely a different environment.
Something I struggled with when I first moved here, having come directly from Denver, totally different cultures between the cities.
For sure.
And that really, I really noticed it. I remember I was angry at people, even my classmates, for using like Dasani water bottles, especially since the school gave us, reusable water bottles, I think on our second day or something. Even to the point with, are we in the same LCM? We are. Mm-hmm. So I would chastise those in our LCM, like at those meetings that we would go to, which stands for Learning Community members. I would chastise everybody for drinking out of the reusable, like the plastic water bottles.
I think I remember you doing that, and like this is before we were homies, and I was like, wow, she's really serious about this. Like, I need to bring my Nalgene. I don't want to piss off Sam.
Yeah, I would make sure to bring it up every single time.
But you're right. It's definitely disposable water bottles are pretty popular. I feel like in the whole like medical community, there's water bottles everywhere you look.
When I got to my very first rotation, it was actually one of the defining features of that place was an Aquafina water bottle.
Yeah, we can't name names, but I definitely remember that too. There was Aquafina everywhere. It was Aquafina Medical Center.
So we move here. We get here. We become medical students. This is end of July of 2018.
Yep.
Big change in our lives. Actually, I got to say, I do remember, even though you say we didn't become homies until later on in the school year, you did send me a Facebook message.
No, you're right. Yeah. So maybe we weren't like super tight, but we did talk on Facebook because like a lot of us had made a little Facebook group. And I remember like you were married, I was married, so we were talking about like what apartment we were going to live in and like.
And we both have cats.
We both had cats, so we definitely did connect before school started, but we weren't homie level yet.
Yeah.
For sure.
It was too soon to know if we were homie level. So we get here, and the first class that we start, actually, it's not really a class, but it's called Professional Immersion, and it's what you spend your first 2 weeks doing here. So you don't just jump straight into learning about, antibiotics and different microbes and stuff. You actually have to do a professional immersion course, which you kind of get a taste of the PBL format. You're in a small group. There's a book reading assignment. Do you remember that?
I do, and it was a good book. And I remember PI, or professional immersion. I remember it feeling to me like a really long orientation, which is kind of exactly what I needed, just because we were all super nervous. Obviously, you're in medical school, you don't have any experience to know what medical school is like. You know it's really important. You know it took a lot to get there. So then kind of being thrown right into the fire would have been tough on top of the nerves that were already there. So it kind of gave me at least a 2-week simmer down period for my nerves. I can actually start learning about like what resources I was going to use and stuff without going overkill and preparing like way ahead of time for no reason. One other thing I'll say that maybe I should have talked about when we were talking about moving, I remember medical school for me, and everyone's different, but I remember for me it felt very different than going away to college. I just remember feeling the gravity of the situation. Like it did take like quite a few years to prepare, like to even have the shot of getting in. And then once you get in, it was kind of like a final realization moment of, wow, I'm actually here, which was obviously felt great. But at the same time, the weight of knowing that like you really can't mess this up, like you can't fail this because it took so long to get here, it definitely hit me harder, especially the first semester. I don't know about you, but I just remember that when I'm thinking back.
For me, because I guess I'm non-traditional in a sense because I'm a bit older and I had a different career prior to going back to school to be in medicine.
Maybe before we talk about the first couple of years, we should tell them a little bit about our background.
Oh, yeah, you think?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, go ahead, sorry.
So I had, originally I have a bachelor's degree in film, and then I started my own production company. And I did a lot of freelance work. I also worked in a lot of hospitality, hotels and stuff, doing video, graphic design. And when I lived in Naples, I had my own production company where I would do small commercials, freelance work, and weddings. And then I decided that I wanted to do something a little bit more, I guess, with my time in life. And I'd always had an interest in reading about diseases, so I figured, hey, why not try to go to med school? And I went back to school, and I got a bachelor's degree in biology and chemistry. And I went straight from those 2 bachelor's degrees. I spent 4 years studying biology and chemistry, and then I went straight into med school after that. So I guess you could say I'm a non-traditional traditional, because I went straight from undergrad into med school.
Yeah,
The second time.
The second time, yeah. Definitely non-traditional in the general sense of like when you're applying to everybody. For me, my background is a little different. I went to college as an athlete. I played football at UCF for a couple years. I realized I wasn't going to make it like all the way to the NFL, so I quit after a couple seasons, and I spent about a year kind of floundering, not knowing what I was going to do with my life.
All the way to the NFL?
I knew I wasn't going to get all the way to the NFL. Wow. That was definitely the dream for most people that go to high up college football. They're like, yeah, I can make it, even though a minority do. So
could you imagine had you gone to the NFL?
Be a different life.
You'd be like mid-career right now.
Yep, few concussions deep.
Man, that's so different.
Oh yeah.
Cool.
I'm happy it ended up this way though. And I've told other people this before, like if it wasn't for doing that, I would not have ended up pursuing medicine because like without going to my whole kind of journey here, football really introduced me to the world of sports medicine and kind of just health and wellness and nutrition and strength conditioning. And that kind of led me down I played football, then I did strength coaching for a while. I changed my major to sport and exercise science. I got my EMT license over a summer, I think between sophomore and junior year of college. And it was really EMT school that like planted the seed in my head of, hey, you could actually, become a healthcare provider. I didn't know what that would be. I considered being a paramedic, but I met a couple kids in my class in EMT school who were pre-med and they were trying to go to medical school. And I remember specifically like when they were telling me all the years of training it would take, I remember kind of laughing like I would never do that. That's insane. And I actually decided to shoot for PA school for a period of time. And yeah, for sure. I did EMT school to get my clinical hours for PA school. But when I and everyone's different. I have a family member who's a PA. I have tons of friends that are PAs that I work with in the ER. They love their career. It didn't sit right with me knowing that, what I want to do in medicine. I wanted to be a leader in medicine. I wanted to kind of like practice to the top of my game. And to do that, you really do have to pursue medical school. So I just kind of shot for that instead. So yeah, the long story short, worked as an EMT for about a year. Then I went and worked as an ER tech in Central Florida. And that's where I worked until I started medical school. So background in emergency medicine and kind of athletics for me.
You know, it's funny you mentioned you wanted to be a PA, but did you know that I wanted to be a dietitian?
I did not. That's pretty cool.
And it seems laughable because I know you can't see, but I'm a fairly robust, a rotund person. So, but maybe that's what drew me to nutrition. But I love the idea of like your food's being made up of these scientific molecules, which at the time with someone with a film background had no idea what any of those things were that you would read on the back of a nutrition label, right? What's a protein? What's a fat? What's a carb? What are those things other than which you hear in the diet culture of what those things are, right? But what really are they? And that inspired me to go back to school. And then I realized as I learned more, I wanted to know more. And then I thought, okay, it's time for me to go be a doctor.
Yeah, when people say like avoid chemicals, like don't put chemicals in your body, then the day you realize that everything is a chemical, it shakes up your world.
Oh, I loved it. I loved it. I remember the first biology class I ever took. I was 29 years old. And they were talking about what a protein looked like. It was this big globular thing. And I was like, whoa, is that it? That's cool. And then when I took a biochem class, you go in further. And it's about the bonds that are made and broken.
And why the proteins look the way they look.
And that's your metabolism. It's just bonds being made and being broken and things being released. And I thought that was just so cool. So I decided, if I continue down the nutrition path, I'm not going to learn more science. So, and coupled with I like to learn, I'm very invasive, and I like to know people's stories, as you know. So
I don't know if I'd characterize you as an invasive person.
I am. I'm an invasive person. I really like to get to know people. So
I agree with that.
I put those two things together, and med school made the most sense. So I figured, why not give it a shot? But here I am. I got to say though, Mitch, your story. It really lays the groundwork for why you've been so successful in med school. And we're going to get to all that, in the rest of this talk. But his athletic background, I think, is what led him to success in med school. And we'll talk more about that. But I would say that's probably the most important thing for you.
Thank you. Sam is my forever hype man, always making me sound like the most disciplined person in the world, which she will claim that I am.
No, he is.
And I don't agree, but
he is. It's because they make you do like weird training and stuff in football.
They definitely do make you do weird training. I remember one of my first workouts, just a quick tangent, we would do these things called Friday morning workouts, which were punishment workouts for being on the scout team, which means you're not a starter, so therefore you must suffer. Oh. And so Friday mornings we would get there, I think at 6 a.m., and it was from 6 to 8. And we would do like a very heavy powerlifting workout, like 10 sets of 10 with squats, with weights that you shouldn't do 10 sets of 10 with. And then we would do like lots of other like leg stuff. We would like carry sandbags around. And like once you were essentially done, completely wasted energetically, they would take you to the field and make you push sleds around and lunge 300 yards on the verge of rhabdo. So you just kind of brought that back.
They should do that for med school. Those who are in the bottom quartile.
Friday morning workouts. Which would be me.
And we have to come in and do extra tests and extra questions.
So Friday morning workouts, perfect segue into what year one was like for you.
Okay. Well,
very smooth transition.
Well, year one, that was a for everyone, everybody says, because you ever see these things on Instagram where the med influencers will put, they'll rank hardest years of med school?
Really try not to.
Okay, you try not to follow them, or you try not to...
If I even see it, I would immediately turn my phone off.
So I've been in the habit of following med influencers, not because I want to be one, but because I secretly want to laugh at them, which is horrible.
That's healthy.
By the way, I'm a horrible person for that. But so they rank the med school years, the 1, 2, 3, 4, which by level of difficulty. And I disagree with a lot of their ranks, right? Okay. Because they don't put third year as the hardest, and I think it's the hardest.
Do you want to give our own personal ranks, too?
Yeah, we're going to give our own personal ranks, even though I just gave my number 1. But we're going to start. Okay, I'm going to rank then. I'm going to say the hardest year is your first year. The second hardest year is your... No, did I say first year?
You said... Well,
third year. No. Okay, your hardest year is your third year. M3 year is the hardest year, hands down. And I'll get into why. Your second hardest year is probably a tie between 1 and 2.
Okay.
And then fourth year is just kind of a cakewalk, but it does have its different kind of stressors. And a lot of that is dealing with the unknown and the ambiguity of it all, of your future. So, you.
So for me, It's a little different. I feel like I have a relative list and an objective list. Like which one, for me, like the objectively hardest one, I agree, is third year, followed by maybe second year, first year, fourth year. But relatively, like what it actually felt like, I think for me was maybe second year, first year, third year, fourth year. Just because at the time, second year felt like the most responsibility, the most stress. You had step one looming. For our school, we had neurology and a couple other things that for me were really difficult. And I just felt like a lot of stress culminating personally second year. But I agree that third year has got to be the hardest if you think about like workload. I mean, you can get lucky and have easy rotations, but the fact that you're working essentially typically 6 or 7, sometimes earlier, sometimes later, depending on the rotation, till, anywhere from 1 o'clock to 5, 6, 7 o'clock, depending on, a range from like psychiatry to surgery as far as difficulty. Plus, you're having to study for shelf exams. Plus, you have step 2 looming, which is becoming like ever so more important. It was definitely difficult.
That's exactly why I think it's the most difficult. And I hear a lot of M1s if you're listening, I hear a lot of you saying that, after step 1, it's going to be easier. Life's so much easier after step 1.
Fail?
Yeah, well, or even just after finishing step 1, even if you get a score. But it's not. Nothing gets easier after that. Everything just becomes more frequent. There's always obstacles.
And I'll say that too, that's why I broke mine down and telling like objectively it's as hard. But like for me, third year was objectively harder, but it didn't feel as hard as second year because although it was objectively harder, like we just talked about, I feel like I had become a better medical student and like I had more resolve and like I got my time management down. And like residency is going to be objectively harder than medical school. And like, I know that goes both ways, but I've heard residents say they like residency is easier for them, I guess relatively speaking, than medical school. And they would never want to go back to medical school because residency is meaningful and like they're actually getting to be a doctor and, it's more hours and it's more responsibility, but they might feel that it's easier. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. And I think for you, the reason why third year didn't seem as difficult maybe as second year is because you had already had a job previously, you've worked as an EMT in the hospital, you know what it's like to do a long shift and maybe go home and study for the MCAT. You sort of have been exposed to that. And I'm not saying there are med students that haven't done that, but the majority don't. The majority don't have a full-time job and then have to study at this high level of studying is your full-time job too. So I think making that abrupt transition is very difficult for a lot of traditional med students, even non-traditional med students. It's tough because your full-time job as both a worker and a student.
Yeah, totally agree. So I guess that was kind of a nice little overview. If you're looking at year 1 specifically, what were kind of your takeaways for first year? And just so you know, at this school, the way our curriculum works, just broadly speaking, is that our preclinical curriculum is a year and a half. We take step 1 roughly February of our second year, plus or minus a month or so, depending on if you're ready or not. But we get a couple months of dedicated. Second year, take step 1, and then we start our clinical rotations a little early. I think about 3 months or so earlier than other schools. We have a little bit of a clinical like prep period. And what that allows is fourth year to be a little bit more relaxed than it might be at other schools with less elective requirements and more time for research and whatnot.
And more time for exploring more clinical options.
Selectives,
I think is the idea.
Electives earlier.
Yes, I think that was the idea when it was created, was that you have more time to do more clinicals so you know exactly what you want to do when you get to fourth year.
Yeah.
Okay, so talking about year 1 specifically, we're going to break it down by year. Year 1. Also, to note, we are a systems-based curriculum.
That's right. So we started off with fundamentals, which is kind of a more of a mix mash of like micro anatomy, basic pharm and whatnot. But then, like she said, from then on, it was systems-based or kind of not really organ-based. For example, one block we have like cardiology, pulmonary, and renal together, or we might have like GI, endocrine, and reproductive together in a block where you learn everything about that system at once.
And those are how the blocks are set up here. We start off with fundamentals, which was your basic microbiology, your basic immunology, basic pathology, and some pharmacological principles.
Like pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics.
Not specific drugs yet. After fundamentals, we go into our hematology block. which is, as you can guess it, hematology.
Yeah, and oncology, hemonc, yeah.
And then we go into our Gyner block, which is GI, nutrition, endocrine, reproduction. That's all one block over a few months. Then our last block of M1 year is our CPR block, which is cardiopulmonary renal. And then we get into M2 year, which is just your brain body behavior. It's called triple B. And then you're off to study for step 1. So starting with year 1. Year 1 for me was the first 75% of it. I'll be honest, I didn't study.
I'm sure you studied.
No, I did, but I still had my old habits of like undergrad type studying where you study the weekend before the test. And this is a great spot for your pancake analogy, which I think everybody, would love to hear.
I feel like I've said this so many times, but I know each time it's like a different audience, so it's fine. So every single person I feel like knows the analogy of your medical school is like drinking from a fire hydrant. Like you can't really take it all in. But I think the pancake analogy is more realistic and applicable. I saw it one time, probably on Reddit, and it's basically that medical school is like eating 5 pancakes per day. Anybody can eat 5 pancakes per day. Maybe not anybody, but if you got into medical school, you can eat 5 pancakes a day, academically speaking. But if you only eat 2 or you only eat 3 per day for a couple weeks, now you've got a backlog of like 30 pancakes and you only have a few days before the test. And it's almost impossible to eat 10, 20 pancakes in a day. And like you can maybe do it, but you're going to be sick to your stomach. So I think just thinking about medical school like that is true. I think it helps you kind of put it into perspective in that it's not necessarily the most incredibly difficult material. Like most people can learn medicine, but there's a lot to it. And it does take some discipline and time management, but it is doable.
And I think that's good that we are both talking about this because we come from completely opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of how we approached our M1 year. Because I had done the bachelor's degrees prior to coming here and I had already had a bachelor's degree from film, I didn't have to do any of those, English 101 type courses. So over 4 years, I just took a lot of advanced biology and chemistry classes. So nothing was new to me in fundamentals. And I took that to mean that I didn't have to study. Add into that our curriculum is pass-fail, and a 75% is pass on your transcript. I mean, within our school, it's pass with concern, meaning that they want to just keep an eye on you, but it's a pass. So to me, my mantra was anything above a 75% is really a waste of my time. So I really used that extra time to sort of get to know classmates, adjust to the area, go to lectures, learn the stuff that probably wasn't going to be on a test. I guess the low-yield material, in addition to the high-yield material. And I wouldn't study until like 3 or 4 days prior to an exam, being honest, maybe 3 or 2 days prior to an exam. And it always worked out until it didn't, in which it didn't. And Mitch knows all about the journey of how Samantha had to... I'll talk about this. I failed masterfully on my first cardiorenal pulmonary exam. I mean, when we get our grades, it has it has a range, right? You remember it had ranges?
I do, yeah. It had a min, a max, a median.
And then the average, right? The min, max, and median, right?
I think a mean, yeah.
Okay. And it would be there for every exam. And then I pulled it up, and the first thing you see were the ranges. And I was like, whoa. Somebody got a 48% on this first exam. That poor person. Oh, my God. How are they even in med school? And I looked, and I opened up my grade, and it was me. And I was so shocked I got into my car. Without even thinking, I just put on my shoes. I got into my car. I drove to campus. I knocked on the course director's door. I'm like, is this a mistake? And she was like, that's what I thought too. And I looked into it. No, it's not. This is your grade. And I was devastated.
That's scary.
It was scary. So I asked, advice of my classmates. I had to meet with my learning community mentor. They set up they went full on after me failing this test. Like I even got a classmate tutor. We met once. Very nice person. And I did much better on the second exam. Highest I've ever scored on an exam at our school. I think like a 90. And I thought, okay, all right, this is gonna be great. I'm gonna redeem myself. And then I didn't quite pull it off for the final. And I failed by I don't know,
just a couple
maybe
points.
a half a percent. But you can't think of it that way. I have to think of it, I failed by a lot, considering that first exam. Yes, there's a couple, maybe a half a percent off from the actual cutoff of you pass or you fail. But really, in reality, I was quite a few points off from understanding the material.
But you're still here.
Yes.
In your fourth year, so what happened?
So I just did a remediation exam, which means they gave me 3 weeks to retake a final that I did very well on. And that's really when I had to change the way I studied. And their reasoning was, Samantha, listen, you went from you're at a linear trajectory upward. You just couldn't quite get to the cutoff. The reason why we're making you redo this is because you'll do better on step 1. And I fully believe that to be true. So this is where I really was able to consolidate like how I should study for medical school, which is practice questions, and then more practice questions. Something, believe it or not, Mitch, I had never done prior to my second CPR test. I had never touched a practice question.
That's impressive that you got that far.
It's impressive and it's chaotic.
Like, how do you know? Like, how do you know you're doing well if you don't do practice questions, you know?
I never used them as a gauge of, so I used to think that you would have to be fully prepared to take a practice test.
Right. It's a common mistake.
It's a huge mistake. And then what I realized is you should just take the practice test and get the questions wrong because it'll help you learn.
And something you said too, like, you don't use them as a performance gauge. I do, but it depends on the situation. Like during step 1 dedicated, I very much was using UWorld as a performance gauge to see like where I was hitting percentile wise. Hopefully my percentile was climbing up a little bit over the course of dedicated. But at the same time, it also is a learning tool, which is what practice questions should be most of the time. It's like you're preparing for a game and, you're practicing all season long. You don't necessarily have to be at the top of your game, but when you're a couple of days out from a big game, you expect your practice plays to be rock solid and you don't want to be messing up basic things on practice plays. So I definitely use it as a learning tool, but depending on the time, I use it as a performance gauge as well. I think for me, year 1 wise, it was a little different story, but not without its like I didn't fail anything, thankfully, but it wasn't without its like struggles or hardships for me, like academically speaking. I was able to strike a pretty good balance between I was able to resume Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I was working out a little bit. I was playing video games most days. Definitely not at first though. The first fundamentals block that you did pretty well in, it was really difficult for me. I think my first test was one of my lowest grades in medical school all around. When we were learning,
was it like a 90?
No, it was. I'm pretty dang sure it was below 75. But when we were learning about specifically immunology, I was just really struggling with that. I had never seen immunology before. I had done like biochem and organic chem and physics and the regular stuff, but immuno was just something I'd never seen. So I really struggled with that. I remember being really stressed, just realizing that I probably wasn't ever going to learn all of it. And it wasn't something I was ever going to master, and I kind of just had to accept that and learn what I could learn. I did well enough to pass, but fundamentals was definitely, it felt chaotic, like you said earlier, in that I hadn't really nailed down a good practice, or a good study method yet. And since there were so many topics, it wasn't like we were just learning hematology. It was like immuno, micropharm, anatomy. So I wasn't able to use certain board resources or anything that would really streamline my studying. So it definitely felt chaotic, like jumping around lots of different resources. And then on top of that, which we hadn't really mentioned, is that since we're a charter class, we don't have any upperclassmen here. So I couldn't reach out to a second-year student or a third-year student and be like, hey, I'm really struggling with immuno with this professor. What did you do to get through it? We just didn't have that. So aside from reaching out to the internet or students in our class who were doing well currently, that's really all we had was each other.
And we couldn't reach out to DO students, right? Because they had the same professors, right? But those professors were already used to teaching within the DO program, which different curriculum, lecture-based.
And although the material might have overlapped sometimes, it wasn't overlapping directly. So it never felt like you could easily ask them questions, not because they weren't great people. A lot of them are awesome. It's just the curriculums didn't overlap. So it was never really easy. As far as the rest of the first year, I kind of hit my stride later in the year. I did pretty well during first year, but I remember towards the end of first year, my subtle anxiety was creeping up on me, just like staying balanced, not being stressed. I remember being very stressed on the summer break between first and second year, and it was probably the most stressed I've ever been in my life, and it was just something I hadn't really dealt with yet. We went on vacation to the Bahamas, and I remember being stressed then. I remember like studying randomly on vacation for a week to the Bahamas.
Studied on
I
your
did.
vacation?
Like not religiously, but that's my mindset then. Like that sounds funny to me now. But
Was it because you were on an Anki and you didn't want to get behind on your pancakes?
it might have been. Like I
Yeah,
don't remember
okay.
doing Anki, but I just remember I don't know if I was like studying for the stuff coming up or if I was like, I can't forget this stuff for step one. It was definitely a bad mindset, and it's not something I would do now or haven't done for quite a while. But I remember being really stressed. And then, yeah, over year one or over summer between first and second year, I did my first research project. That was probably the highlight of my summer. It was the first time I'd really done research. So, I got a little experience with that. And then, I think you put the research off till later, right?
I had to because I had to use that time to
remediation.
To remediate, and
That's right.
I will tell you, if anybody out there listens to this, I was like down in the dumps. You remember?
We all had our little weak points,
Yeah.
right?
Do you remember? I was like convinced that I was done. The med school, I was defeated.
That was when we were
and-
first becoming friends.
Yeah.
I feel like Marissa
no, you
and I-
moved across the hall from me at that
did.
point.
We-
Or no, you moved on the 8th floor. I lived on the very bottom.
I definitely remember Marissa and I coming over and talking to you and you being really down in the dumps.
Yeah.
About like, man, what if I don't pass this remediation test?
Exactly.
Like, that's a real deal worry.
That was more stressful to me than step one.
I think it kind of should be.
Yeah.
Like,
because it meant, okay, if I didn't pass the remediation test, guess who was doing their M1 year again?
exactly. Which
So-
isn't like the end of the world. Like
It's
people have
not.
done it and succeeded, but that's a big weight,
That made step one, triple B, it made everything much easier after that point.
Right. So we each had strengths and weaknesses first year. It was a wild ride. I think the overall summary for us was it was kind of chaotic, and it was a big
Yes.
learning experience. That was our similarity.
It was tough. Like, that's just the academic part. In my personal life, too. Like, I've been married 16 years. Thank goodness. Nice guy.
Love that guy.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I don't know why he likes me, but he does, so I'll just go with it. We were living long distance, too, which was hard that first year. And that contributed a lot to my not studying because I figured, you know what, I'm going to be a med school Monday through Friday, be a med student. Weekends, I'm going to be a free, regular person.
Which is fair in some regard. Yeah.
But I don't know that it's the way to approach it with
Right.
something so delicate and as precious as med school.
So definitely a tough, weird time. I'd like to think that we've alleviated that stress for the first year since they have us now. Not necessarily us, but like they have upperclassmen to reach out to all the time.
Yeah.
So maybe it's a little bit easier for them. But I feel like us being the only students in our program made it that much more difficult.
It did, yeah. It had its pluses and
Yeah.
negatives. Pluses, the faculty were on us,
They helped.
yeah.
So then year two, let's move into that.
So year two. Year two was a really easy year.
Overall,
Yeah.
definitely. I think the worst part of it for me was neurology. There's something about neurology, man, that just was so difficult. And I'll tell you, it was my highest test, my best test score. I think I got the high. I'd never gotten the high before.
Whoa.
But I swear to God, I literally thought I was going to fail that test until about a week and a half before the test. I think I went to Plazik, Dr. Plazik, who was one of our neuro professors. Just the tracks and the different lesions at different parts of the brain and it just something about it wasn't sticking. And I had to watch like the same videos over and over and over, and it finally just clicked one day, and everything was fine. But that was the low point of year two outside of dedicated for me.
I think because I already had the failure on my record, I knew.
What was going to touch you?
Yeah, I knew that I needed to, no matter what, prepare for that neurology. I knew neurology was going to be hard.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, neurology is going to be so hard. Oh my gosh. No matter what, I'm studying every day and I'm keeping up with it. And I did. And actually, one of the relieving things about practice questions is that, yes, there are tons of tracks, all the spinal thalamic, all those tracks. There's a lot of them, right? But then you find out in your practice questions that they can only ask us about those things in so many different ways.
Yep.
And that became extremely reassuring.
So year two was the year of the practice question. for
Year
you.
two was the year of the I got through the your neurology thing twice probably because I wanted to know every single way they could ask me about this. I could get lost in the details of the tracks, or I could just say, you know what, screw it. Whatever's a practice question, that's what I'm focusing on.
Yeah, and without plugging certain, obviously there's different practice question companies and stuff. I think that, I've used probably 3 or 4 over the course of the 4 years I'm here, I've tried out 3 or 4. Obviously, everyone uses UWorld, but I think that whatever company you use to incorporate practice questions into your studying, whether it's year 1, 2, or even for step 2, it's just so key.
I used UWorld and Kaplan. I doubled down.
Yeah, I used UWorld, and actually first year I used USMLE RX, which I feel like most people don't really use anymore.
Yeah.
But that was my intro to practice questions, so it'll always have a place in my heart.
I remember people talking about it like the first month of them one year, and I was like,
It's whatever.
Yeah.
It's just another one. They're all pretty good. So yeah, and then obviously we ended when we say brain body behavior, that was neurology, psychiatry, and
bones and joints.
Yeah, musculoskeletal.
Muscles, joints, that kind of
which
stuff.
was kind of a revisit to anatomy from the beginning, but with a focus on musculoskeletal pathology
and like rheumatological diseases.
In rheum, yeah. So then we ended it with psychiatry, which was really nice. For me, psychiatry was the easiest thing we learned. Not that it was easy material, but it was the least demanding. And I feel like once you kind of memorize the different conditions, for me, it was the least rigorous, which was nice because I was able to like kind of master psychiatry during that period of time and also transition towards dedicated, which was following that.
I think what made psychiatry one of the more palatable subjects is that it's all very tangible. You can see these things in there. When you think about different pathologies for other diseases, you kind of have to shrink yourself down and go into the body and see these things you've never seen before.
Pathophysiologic changes versus psych is just, not just, but a lot of it's just classifications.
And behavior that you can see with your own eyes. Yep. So it makes it stick a little bit easier for me. And then, we went into step 1. And
what a time.
Before step 1, they gave us a CBS, like a practice test.
The practice test.
Yeah, they gave us a practice test, which I got 163 on. So that's
pretty high, right?
No, that's pretty low.
I'm just kidding.
Just so you guys all know, passing was 194 for us. It's 196 now.
And the number's kind of irrelevant if you don't see the percentile charts. Like correct. A 194 is like what? 5th percentile? 5th percentile. Yeah, and then I think a 230-ish is like 50th.
Yeah.
And then even above that, it's weird. Like a 260 is where 265 plus is where you start getting like 99th percentile. Mm-hmm. So, that's that range, and it's kind of weird. So 165, not great.
Not at all. No. And so I went in with we had 8 weeks?
I think we had 8 weeks.
8 weeks of dedicated.
If you added Christmas break, I think we had like 9 or 10.
Okay, I didn't.
Maybe I'm wrong.
I took a Christmas break.
Yeah, I did too. Some people did too, but that's what we had between psych and then.
So I started my step prep. This is kind of an inspiring story for those who are listening. I started with a base of a 163. And the very first test I took was I think a UWorld Part 1 test, or the UWorld 1 test. I failed it. I freaked out.
I remember you freaking out.
I delayed by 2 weeks. Gave myself 2 extra weeks of study time.
We were homies at this point.
Yeah, we were totally homies. Then I took an NBME exam. I failed it. I was like, you know what, my
always a good sign.
I was like, my percentage went up. Then I took an NBME and I passed it, and then I passed the rest of them from then on, but not by very much, by maybe 2 or 3 points. And then going into the step exam, I was a little nervous because the highest NBME score I had gotten was a 203, which is just barely above passing. But I figured, you know what, it's now or never. Anyways, I went in, I did well, it all worked out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mine was similar. I mean, the only difference is that I started off strong. I think I took UWorld 1 sometime towards the beginning, maybe like early January. I took mine, I believe, on February 28th. I took it early January, did pretty well, like close to my goal score. And I was like, wow, awesome, I'm doing so great. But I had heard that test like overpredicted a little bit, so I didn't really know what to make of it. And then I did well in the next NBME, but then I took about 5 more NBMEs, and each one went down.
Oh, man.
Down to like below average to like not a range I wanted to be in. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I think you might have been more set on like internal medicine at that point. I was a typical second year, didn't really know what they wanted to do. I was considering emergency medicine as my like top choice, but things like orthopedic surgery sounded really cool, and I knew that was competitive. So I was aiming for this. We all were aiming for the highest score we could get, but my scores were not there. And each NBME just kept going down and down and down. And I think it kind of correlated with my stress level. There was definitely a point about 2 weeks before dedicated where I realized how stressed I was getting, and I kind of just took a step back. And after that, I took a couple more practice tests. They were more in the range I wanted, and I just kind of yellowed the test like we all did. At some point, whether it's step 1 or step 2, you do just kind of have to say, I've done what I could, and it's time to take the thing.
I think there's this mindset, you once you've arrived at that mindset of, I don't care, I just want to be done, then you're ready for the test.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you're not like truly burnt out where like you're not going to perform well, but for sure, like I didn't feel that so much for step 1. It was more of just like an acceptance phase for me. For step 2, I 100% felt like that, which we can talk about soon. But it was like, okay, I've done so much work for this test. I don't know what else there is to do. Like I can sit here and regurgitate stuff and, remind myself of what I don't know, but it's time to take it.
And if anybody is seeking any like more like less vague tips on step 1, we can have a separate episode on that. But briefly for me, I did UWorld. I didn't even finish UWorld. I think I got 95% of the way through.
Nice.
And I did all the NBME practice exams. No matter what, I did an exam every week. And I think you were the same. Even if you didn't feel ready, you did an exam.
At least I did an NBME every week, I believe.
Every week I did, and I did every single one of them. And I don't know. I don't know if it's a cliche to share your score or taboo, but I got a 230. And I started at that baseline of a 163 and went through each NBME, barely getting to passing, barely above passing,
right.
And then I performed on test day. And that's the way you have to think of it. Like Mitch was saying earlier, it's all a competitive event. For me, all the points I missed prior to test day were points gained on test day. I really made sure I understood what I was getting wrong on my UWorld questions. So if it meant one day of studying was me just getting through 40 questions, actually doing the questions and going through the explanations, then that's what it was. And I think it paid off for me. Is it the world's greatest score? No. Is it great for me? Absolutely. It wasn't gonna, box me out of anything I wanted to do. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't have summarized it more. It was basically the same thing for me. I guess this is a good transition into third year, I think. It was weird for us because right around step 1 was the beginning of COVID.
That's right.
Which was weird. Probably the best time for COVID to have happened as far as a medical student, just because after step 1, our school did a really good job, I think, actually, of kind of understanding that clinicals were going to be impacted. We did a bunch of online stuff. We actually did some online electives that counted towards fourth year during that summer-ish, spring to summer period of 2020.
Yeah.
And those ended up making our fourth year a little easier. We did didactic portions online. So for our clinical rotations, so like our internal medicine was supposed to be 8 weeks, but we did 2 weeks online of internal medicine didactics, which was lectures on more third year oriented clinical internal medicine. And then once we got to our actual rotations later on in the year, they were truncated a bit. So the 8 week rotations were 6 weeks, and the 4 week rotations were 3 weeks.
And I think the COVID sort of threw a wrench into the exciting things that were supposed to be cool about our program and about starting in this charter class was that we would get those 3 extra clinical months, which we didn't get.
The selective,
which we didn't get.
Which is just an elective. Like it's an elective that's built into your track. So you don't pick it free form, but it's an extra experience that you would normally get.
But the third years are now doing theirs.
Yep.
But we just missed out on that. But I mean, like a lot of people miss out on a lot of things because of COVID.
It's fine.
Just is what it is.
Yeah.
But that's when it hit. I myself got COVID. That was I got it in March. I could have had it while I was taking step 1. I don't know. I know we had our masks fitting, our N95 mask fitting, and I'm pretty sure I had COVID, and you guys all stuck your heads in there after me.
I didn't get it.
I didn't know. COVID wasn't even here yet. It wasn't a thing.
There were like 5 cases in the whole country.
I was case number 30 in Broward County. Look it up. It was me.
Look at the literature.
Yeah, go find that in the literature. But then then it was just like Zoom University after that.
All right, so let's go through third year, kind of rotation by rotation, and just talk about what our experiences were like. I know we both started with internal medicine.
I know that you and we were homies. So
we were homies at that point. We're definitely more homies than we were then.
But we tried to coordinate tracks, remember?
We did,
We did the same ranking.
We did do the same ranking, We didn't share every single rotation together. We were on internal medicine together, which was our first rotation. And I will point out that I had wanted to do surgery first because I wanted to see early on, do I like surgery? And internal medicine, I was just like, let's do that at the end. I'm really glad it didn't work out that way just because of how tracks were switched around, I think, because of COVID. I got internal medicine first.
Yeah, it was originally supposed to be that we had surgery first and then we would go straight into IM. But because of COVID, our first rotation was tacked on to the end.
Yep.
So our second rotation became our first rotation. I wanted to do surgery first because I knew I didn't want to do surgery. So I figured, let me get it over with while I am my freshest and stupidest.
Yep, and I was like actually considering, not that I wanted to do surgery, but I really wanted to see it early on just in case I loved it. So we had different motives, but still wanted to do it first.
So we ended up actually starting with IM, which some would say is a difficult one to start with.
Definitely.
I think it's the best one to start with in terms of it sets you up for a great third year in terms of knowledge base.
I agree that it was the hardest, and I also agree that it's the best.
Yes. And when I first started IM, I actually kept a running daily personal vlog about my take from each day. And when I started with IM, I hated it. And I'll tell you why I hated it. Because I felt like there were too many patients. You didn't get to spend that much time with them. You barely got to know them. And you really just look at their lab numbers. And really all you're doing in IM is you're updating other people about your patients all day. That's all you're doing is you're telling these little mini stories about this person, but you're not even talking about the person. You're talking about some vague labs within their body. And
It's always the sodium.
Yeah, it was always the sodium or the potassium. And they weren't even a human. Even we would just say room number and talk about the person. Or it became, okay, we're talking about hypertension guy now, and this is MI guy,
Low sodium
guy.
and 312.
Yeah, and that's what become the patient's name, Oh, this is headache girl,
Low sugar guy.
Yeah, low sugar guy. And I didn't like it, but it started to grow on me.
Me too.
To the point to where I would love it.
Yeah, and just disclaimer, which we'll talk about soon, but Samantha and I both applied to internal medicine. We're fourth years now. I have one interview left. I think you're done, or you have
I have one left.
You have one left as well. We both happily applied to internal medicine, so it made a good impression at the end of the day. I
think when I finished IM on my last week, I did not want to leave. I was sad. That's when I almost cried, Mitch. That was so sad to leave.
I remember feeling the same way, and my kind of journey through IM rotation was, at first I expected absolutely nothing but just learning a lot of stuff and preparing for my shelf. And then I had that same thing happen to me where I just involuntarily would wake up earlier and earlier because I wanted to get to the hospital to check on my few, 2 or 3 patients that I was following. I felt a genuine sense of responsibility for their care, even though I was just a third-year medical student, which I think is good. And I wasn't always making a huge impact. Obviously, you're just a third-year medical student. But I feel like I did make a big impact on just a couple patients over the course of that month and a half. And that was all it really took for me. But I really loved coming in every day. I loved rounding. I know long rounds suck for everyone. But, man, when you're on a good team and you have a great attending and your residents are teaching you stuff, I just really got into it. And it satisfied me kind of intellectually in a way that other specialties and other careers that I had planned just couldn't. To that point, I was very gung-ho for emergency medicine. And that was the big switch for me.
It's a shock you're not doing EM.
Everyone was shocked.
Everybody was shocked. Why? Tell them why.
Well, my background, I worked in the ER for 3 years, close to 3 years. I was an EMT. I had started the emergency medicine interest group at our school, one of the founding members with my classmate Caitlin. And, I loved emergency medicine.
You even did an EM interview.
That came later, I think. But I did quite a bit of stuff.
You did research with the EM
I organized
people.
an EMS ride along. We did a lot of stuff in the EMIG, the interest group. So I gave emergency medicine every opportunity to hook me, and internal medicine did instead. So I'm happy.
What I loved about IM so much was I actually loved rounding. For me, the longer, the better, the more fun. It was magical. It's what you would imagine a doctor does.
I like long rounds when there was good teaching involved, but I don't like long rounds when it's I don't know, just because of the geography of the hospital or
Oh, I had a good teaching team, and I loved walking. Well, I personally hate walking up the stairs, but we did that, and I loved going to each patient's room. It was like changing the channel on the TV. You would always see something different, a different patient, and then you learn more. And it's so enchanting and so magical to me. Hey, do you remember when we were on our IM rotation and I ended up in the hospital?
Was it the IM rotation?
It was the IM rotation, yeah. 2 weeks in, actually.
Yeah, I do. Which time?
Oh, yeah, that's true. That was surgery later.
Yeah. That's why I was thinking of that.
That's why you're bad luck.
Yep.
Yeah, we
I'm
can't
a black
be
cloud.
co-interns.
But yeah, internal medicine was great overall, and like we could probably do a whole episode on just our relationship to internal medicine. But
we will, because
yeah, we will.
That's
maybe
who we are.
maybe move on to the smaller rotations and just give our
Yes.
kind of quick takes on those.
Yes.
OBGYN thoughts.
Loved it. It was my most favorite rotation. I didn't pick OB because I couldn't do that for the rest of my life. I have to be able to do everything. But the intimacy and the really getting to know your patients the way you do
Sure.
is just, it's beyond any other specialty that exists.
I thought it was super cool. I liked it more than I thought I would. The OBGYNs I met were some of the coolest doctors and still are to this day.
Yep.
Shout out Dr. Rolando De Leon.
Yeah.
One of the best human beings alive.
Yep. Every OBGYN I've ever known. Shout out Dr. Samantha Bunting. Shout out Dr. Jay Cohen.
Nick Salas.
Yeah, all of them amazing.
Yeah, really, at least at our school, really fantastic OBGYN.
The rapport you get to
people.
build with your patients is like none other.
Yeah, and I thought the mix of just like the women's health in the clinic mixed with like legitimate surgery in the OR and kind of the in-between was awesome.
Let me shout out Dr. Palmarola. She's the world's best OBGYN reproductive endocrinologist.
Shout out.
I learned the most from her.
So yeah, pretty good OBGYN experience at our school. Still didn't want to do it, but a lot of
Same.
people in our class were swayed to
Yeah.
OBGYN. So definitely a good experience here. What about psychiatry?
I loved it. I loved it so much. I could never do it because this was the only rotation I was taking home with me. I would leave with a heavy feeling in my chest. I would leave. And
Can't relate. I
Did
did
you-
not like it. I did not like psychiatry. I think I would have liked outpatient psych, but inpatient psych, just not for me.
It bummed me out, man. It made me so sad.
I was real sad the whole
like,
time.
I would wake up at 2 a.m. and think about that person who got discharged back to the streets. And
Yeah, I'm not saying I
can't
didn't.
help,
I'm not saying I
and-
didn't learn anything. It just made me very sad because
it was depressing.
if you haven't been in an inpatient psych ward, I mean, it'll open your eyes to how difficult mental health can be on people when it gets to the extremes that it requires involuntary hospitalization. It's pretty rough.
And sometimes your treatment options are limited. And even then, the recovery isn't that great. And it's just sad. But shout out to all the residents that were probably the most awesome residents that we got to work with.
Fantastic residents, great experience as far as like working with people. Just not my favorite cup of tea.
Fair enough.
Primary care,
Oh, I loved it.
great time.
Yeah, I want to be a primary care physician one day. So it was, I got to be with the doctor that I precepted with my M1 and M2 year. His patients are amazing, mostly geriatrics. It really inspired me to want to go into geriatrics because of the stories, the patients, the whole thing, the wisdom of your patients. You learn from them, which is incredible.
For me, I worked at an endocrinology office. It actually kind of felt like an outpatient endocrine rotation, even though it was primary care for me. It was a thyroid and diabetes specialist kind of office. So I learned a lot about thyroid conditions. I learned a lot about, we did thyroid biopsies in the office. That was cool. Learned about diabetes management and how much I still need to learn about that. It was a good time. And then maybe finally we can wrap up with surgery for a
Or
third
you're
year.
forgetting.
Wait, what am I forgetting? I know
I
it's...
mean, it makes sense that we would forget about it, seeing as we're going into IM.
What? What am I forgetting? I know I remember it,
This
but
is the most forgettable patient population on the planet. Peds. Sorry, future peds.
Peds was fine. It wasn't my favorite rotation. I take it back. The inpatient part of it, we had some pretty sick kids. I saw Kawasaki disease. That was pretty legit. I love kids, first of all. Don't get me wrong. Love hanging out with kids, but man, I just don't like taking care of them medically. I'd rather be with adults. I think for me, it's a communication thing. I like being able to talk to my patients. I don't like having to talk through the parent. It was more difficult to get a history, obviously. So it just wasn't my cup of tea.
I came in because prior to starting med school, I had scribed in a pediatric ENT, and I was like, oh, man, I love peds. Peds are great. I can't imagine not working with kids. And I came in thinking I'd be a pediatric oncologist, and things have certainly changed a lot.
I remember that.
Also, I can't work with kids. They're unreasonable under the age of 5. And if they're not unreasonable, their parents are either too worried about something or not worried enough about something, and that is always something you have to balance, and it's hard.
A little too neurotic or a little too uncaring.
Yeah, and that is frustrating.
For sure. But then you have the rare unicorn where the kid's like 3 years old or 4 years old and they're wonderful and the parents are wonderful.
Yeah,
but I feel like that's rare.
Asterisk rare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, I've met them. They exist.
Yeah.
And that's fine. If they're all like that, I'd probably do peds.
Yeah.
And then surgery is the last one. She says, you shake your head in disgust.
Actually, though, remember at the end of my IM rotation, I had been able to go observe a few surgeries with the surgeon that did my surgery. He was nice enough to let me come in and observe his surgeries, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to be a surgeon because, and I had just had my surgery.
What did you have?
I had a cholecystectomy, big shock.
You're a first aid mnemonic.
I think I meet all 5 Fs. So I had that surgery, and I thought to myself, you know what? I was on my way to Bed Bath & Beyond with my husband, and I thought, if it wasn't for this doctor, shout out Dr. Kahani, the world's best surgeon, I wouldn't be here today going to Bed Bath & Beyond to just walk down the aisles and look for something useless I didn't need. Because
Therefore, I'm going to be a surgeon.
I want to have that impact on people's lives. Because honestly, as much as I trash surgery, I think they're incredible. And
Agreed.
I think what they do is absolutely essential to the world. They cure people.
Yeah.
They're incredible.
For me, surgery was like that quote, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times.
Absolutely, same.
Yeah,
Same.
like I saw some of the most amazing things on my surgery rotation. Like I remember looking, it was some open surgery, I think it was like a duodenal tumor on this patient. And I remember looking and seeing like the IVC and like touching it and like feeling just different structures you just read about. I thought that was incredible. Just, having that like responsibility to be working inside someone's body, is pretty cool. And we had some pretty awesome surgery attendings for the most part. They let us do quite a bit. They let us like dissect stuff. And when we would assist, they would actually let us like, Bovie things and do some pretty cool parts of the operation, at least be there for the more major stuff. So although the hours were really, really long, kind of unreasonably so at times, I think that it was still a really memorable experience. It definitely taught me I liked procedures, which is great because I think I want to do cardiology, which can be procedure heavy. So that's what I got out of it, a good memory and some,
This is one of the rotations we did together again, right?
Yeah, you and I were together for that one.
You're right. All the attendings were fabulous on our surgery rotation.
Like
They
literally
were all very cool.
And even the OR staff we had 2 locations. One location's but the other location, man, they were some of the nicest people ever. And it was where I started, and they were some of the most just welcoming people. Like, oh, you're not great at scrubbing? Let me show you. Oh, you don't know where this is? Let me show you. So it was a good time.
That being said, when we talk about the worst times of surgery and we talk about why, because we're just sitting here, we're blowing smoke up surgery's butthole, really. But when we think about, but when we talk about the downfalls of surgery and why, because we're puffing it up here, we're gassing up surgery, but we're not saying why we didn't choose it. For me, all of those things you hear about surgery were for the most part true, from my experience. All the negative things you hear about the tantrums, the ego. It's all there. And I don't know, it's unfair to say that all surgeons are like that, because they're not. But I think that field might attract people that tend to act that way, maybe a little bit. But I don't. There's been times where you see tantrums in the OR and just this level of extremism in work.
Yeah, just really intense, unnecessarily so at times. And my favorite surgeon, I won't say his name, but he was the chillest surgeon I met. Also the best, like that I could tell procedurally, like very quick, like did very complex stuff very quickly, while also teaching like pretty in depth during the case. But he was the one surgeon that would never do that. And like the OR staff would tell me, like, yeah, he's one of the chillest guys. He's so friendly. So there's no need to be intense to a detriment or to be mean or to be, just cruel to your trainees and stuff. There's really no need for it because there's excellent doctors that don't do that.
But it's that mentality of hardcore for the sake of hardcore. Like, oh, I got 3 hours of sleep. Would you get 5? Well, I got 3. I got 2. Well, I've been here for 10 hours. I've been here for 15 hours. It was that sort of like, you go for it, go get it, go grind, go do it. Grind set mindset. And that was like that doesn't go with my being. Yeah, I guess.
I'm not about that surgery grind set either. So yeah, that was surgery. Best of times and the worst of times. And then here we are. We're in 4th year. We quickly talk about step 2.
Real quick, what we should talk about, though, is going through the clerkships as a charter class, because these programs, these places, these hospitals did not know what to expect from our school.
They did not.
And we didn't know what to expect at these places because we had no 4th years ahead of us to tell us, or 3rd years ahead of us to tell us. So I think I think it went pretty well.
Definitely went well. I think that I leaned on some of the fourth years and third year medical students from other schools that I interacted with by chance. I know Nova Dio students we would see quite a bit. FIU down here we would see quite a bit. And then you'd always see visiting students on away rotations. Yep. So I think just sharing experiences with them was helpful. Leaning on some of the fourth years we met was helpful. Yeah.
And I think the issues we had are the same issues that everybody has at every school, whether it's been around for 100 years or it's been around for one. The whole attending tells you you're doing great, resident tells you you're doing great, 3 out of 5 on your evaluation.
Yeah, I thought that was just a meme until it happened to me.
Yeah, it's real. And I thought it just happened at our school until I saw all the memes. So it's just third year.
It's just the universal third year.
It's ambiguity at its finest.
So then, and then moving into fourth year, we had been taking shelf exams all throughout third year, which were basically like mini step 2 exams divided into subjects. So I feel like we were pretty prepared for step 2 dedicated more so than step 1, where the preface to step 1 dedicated was chaos and being unorganized versus the preface to step 2 dedicated was going through third year, really honing down your study skills, really honing down your time management, studying for step 2 piece by piece, shelf by shelf. Mm-hmm. So then by the time I got to step 2, and I'm pretty sure yours was similar, I mean, we were doing our U World, but it didn't feel like so much of a grind. It was just like, all right, at least I'm off rotations. Let's get this done. Boom, boom, boom. Eat your pancakes. Mm-hmm. All right. By the time I got to step 2, I was like, let's get this done.
Yep.
And it was not the same. I was definitely better at handling my stress and just being more balanced. But we talked about it earlier. I was definitely more, okay, it's time to do this. We've done what we can. Let's knock it out.
It was just the next in a line of very long obstacles that are going to be defining the rest of our careers. So for me, it was exactly how you say. Not difficult at all. You just do your world, do your questions. It'll all work out. And it did. It was an easier test, too.
Quick story time about my step 2 experience.
Please.
So I couldn't find one in this area, so I had to drive 2 hours west to Fort Myers. So I get there, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, it's a good idea to go to the testing center and make sure it exists, it didn't blow up or something. So I walk up to the door, and there's a sign on the Prometric door, and it says, due to a flood or due to some sort of flooding incident, the testing center, all tests are closed today. But that was the day before my test, and I was like, oh, my God. So I called Prometric, and it took me like 45 minutes to get through to somebody. And the guy was like, look, I assure you this is a single day event. Tomorrow should be fine. But he couldn't really guarantee me anything other than it should be fine. It was just some water pipe busted, but they fixed it. So I was like, okay. So then I went to my hotel. And I parked in my hotel, and as I'm walking inside, a transformer blows up over my head, sparks everywhere, extremely loud. I thought someone shot me. And then I walk inside, and the whole hotel's out, no power. And the lady's freaking out. Everyone's coming to the lobby, yelling at her. And she can't check me in. So I find a different hotel across the street. I go into that. Okay, so I'm checked into my hotel. So then I'm like, I'm going to go get some food. I go to Chick-fil-A. And the Chick-fil-A drive-thru line is really long, so I'm like, I'll park right here at Walmart and walk in and just go get my carry-out food. So I walk up to the door and the dining room's closed. Because, it's Chick-fil-A during COVID.
It's COVID, yeah.
But that was the last strike for my step 2 journey. Everything else after that was smooth. Did pretty well. All is well.
Yeah, you did amazing. You're amazing.
Thanks, bro.
Mitch is real smart, by the way. But yeah, step 2 worked out great. I took every break. I ate big shock. I ate a Snickers bar during
That's a great testing snack, though.
Yeah, it worked.
I had pistachios.
Oh, well, look at you.
And I think I had candy, too. Don't worry.
Okay. What else? I mean, that's it. That's it. I mean, going through this all. So now we're at the point that everybody wants to get to in med school. We're at the interview stage of residencies. And the big question, I think, to answer is because the theme is sort of we're a charter class, right? We had to pave this road on our own. How has it been for interviews?
So, I mean, it's been pretty weird. We did first of all, we didn't know how many to apply to. So we kind of consulted Reddit and forums and our advisors, and everyone's got their own opinion, and it can vary based on your step scores and your application or
how many
specialty.
Did you apply to?
I applied to 53, which is I think on the lower end, for this year.
Yes, I applied to 91.
I feel like I don't know if it was ever published on what the average was.
It was in JAMA, 72.
Okay, so we split the difference.
Yeah.
You went a little higher, I went a little lower.
And that makes sense, all things considered.
But yeah, I mean, like, I don't regret it. I think that I think I have 15 interviews.
Okay.
And for the most part, they're at places I would really like to go to. I think if I had applied more broadly location-wise, I would have got some cool places. But I just, one of the things for me is I really wanted to stay in the south to southeast area of the U.S. It's just more comfortable for us. And yeah, so I kind of went location-wise and then broke it down by schools I actually could see myself, or programs I could really see myself doing well at least I could, as far as I could tell on paper.
And Mitch and I had a bet going. Was that the person who had more interviews actually had to buy a round of Panda Express. Is that bet over now?
Well, no, not until I feel like at least our rank lists are in.
Okay, so we still have time.
An interview could come in at any second now.
That's true.
Probably not, but it could.
Okay.
What are you at?
18.
I'm not getting 19, so you're buying me Panda.
Damn it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's
Can
been...
I buy you Spaghetto instead?
I would rather you buy me spaghetti.
Okay.
Sure, it's more
All right.
expensive. I mean, Panda sounds good, but
Okay, maybe we'll stick to Panda.
it's been a fun time. How did you like interviews being online?
I loved that my interviews were online in terms of the convenience of it and not having to fly anywhere. And the whole, like, not, in my opinion, looking entirely presentable enough to go in person and have somebody see me in 3D.
In 3D?
Yeah. You can hide a lot of online. Catfish in these programs.
Yeah.
No, I liked that aspect of being able to do it from home. I absolutely hated that I didn't get to go to the hospital and feel
100%.
the energy because that means everything.
Without just saying the same thing over again, I agree. I think that it's amazing that you don't have to spend, $100 to $500 on travel every single time you interview. I think that's kind of crazy because you have to go on 15, ish plus, depending on your specialty. So I know it would have costed a ridiculous amount, but at the same time, at least for the schools I'm really serious about, like, I would love to go, see what rounds are like, see what the facilities are like, see what the culture in person is like, not just what a few residents are telling me over Zoom, which, I've met some awesome people over Zoom, but there's nothing like going to the hospital, seeing the area. So I don't know, not to give like solutions or anything. I just wish that maybe I've heard this presented like after you put in your rank list, you could go do a second look somewhere where it's not going to impact your decision because the schools have already submitted their rank list. You've already submitted your rank list. It's just you genuinely want to go see, or maybe like the schools have or the programs have submitted their rank list, but you haven't. So you get a chance to go like authentically check these places out without it affecting your ranking.
Yeah, that would be ideal. Ideally, it'd be nice to just go back to how it was.
Yeah, but then you lose the benefits of the cost
That's
savings.
fine.
Just is what it is.
It is what it is,
Yeah.
right? Because the ball's in our court as applicants.
And this is new, too. It's what they did for decades, and nobody really complained about it.
Correct.
And people actually liked just traveling and seeing all the different places. And
meeting people, eating dinners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Rank is applicant preferenced, and I think that's so important. Med school is not applicant preference, it's school preference, right? It's hard to get into med school, but residency, it's a bit easier. The numbers are higher. You have a 90-something% chance, knock on wood, that you match. So it would be great to go to these hospitals and to just sit in the lobby or, just feel it, to know it.
Yeah, even when I would watch some videos on programs and the residents would be like, oh, the second I walked into this hospital, I knew this is my place. So, yeah, I mean, that would be nice.
It's hard to say that for Zoom. The second I logged onto Zoom, I knew.
Playing devil's advocate, is it necessary to go? Probably not, but it would sure be nice.
I think it's necessary because you're working there.
You're right, yeah.
For any job interview.
I would
most
rather
job
go
interviews, people have to fly out to interview at those
100%,
places.
I agree.
For med school, not so much.
And then,
but I will say, the second I logged onto the Zoom for the place I want to rank number 1, I knew.
There you go.
Yeah. Did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I kind of knew beforehand. They just kind of confirmed it for me.
Were they playing classical music in the wind?
They were not.
As everybody was logging in.
I don't know if that would have changed anything. So yeah, wrapping this up, I guess, we're pretty much at the end of what we wanted to talk about today. It's already been an hour and some change here.
If you've listened to the whole thing.
Thank you.
Wow.
What are you doing?
Why?
I think we're cool people, but you don't have to.
Either way, we have this that we can listen to one day.
If no one listens to it, at least we will, and maybe our spouses.
Yeah, our spouses will for sure
Probably
listen
my
to
mom
it.
and dad.
Aw,
I think they're here
hey.
at this point. They've
Hey.
made it this far.
Hey, Mitch's mom and dad.
So really at this point, we've done interviews. We have one left. We're basically done. We have 58 days till match day on my little countdown I
Me
saw.
too, yeah, 58 days.
In only about a couple weeks, our rank list open up.
And hopefully we'll have an episode about that whole process,
Sure.
how it went. Maybe, maybe not. I mean, it depends. If you guys like this, then we'll tell you how it ended up for us.
Yeah, but
If we matched.
We're going to match. Let's not jinx ourselves. It's been fun. It's weird not really doing a whole lot now. I have an elective coming up soon, but it's not really a hard elective. So I feel like I'm kind of done with medical school at this point, which is crazy. We have match in March, and then, that's pretty much it. We graduate in May, but there's really not much we have to do afterwards.
I have an elective. I'm doing psych again come February, and then, I have nothing else going on. I'm a student on the ISA for our accreditation because our school should be fully accredited by October. And that sort of leads into the future of this podcast or whatever it is.
Yeah, so we worked with a couple of the first year students that we met recently. They wanted to start a podcast too. We just kind of all had this idea of, hey, it would be fun. Something I've always wanted to kind of venture into. I don't really have any experience in it. But yeah, we're kind of still thinking about what we want this to be geared towards. Obviously, like we're medical students, but there's people that listen to these type of podcasts that are either medical students or pre-med students. I feel like that is probably the general mix-up. After medical school, I don't imagine most people listen to these type of podcasts that are medical student centric. But you never know. So
Right.
If you have any ideas, if you made it this far and you actually enjoyed this, let us know.
If you were just accepted to NSU and you want to know what the experience is like year 1 through 4, knowing that we're the charter class, so hopefully it can't get any worse, then this is a good thing to listen to. And going forward, we have a lot of topic ideas, and you can send us your topic ideas. Give us any name suggestions you may have for this podcast. We don't know.
We specifically don't have a title just yet because we didn't want to force something. We wanted to see how this first episode went. So we'll either come up with something or somebody will let us know and we'll agree that sounds great. But yeah, thank you for listening this far. It's been about an hour and 20 minutes or so.
This isn't the last you'll hear from me and Mitch.
Oh no, we may not be here every single time. We might switch up who's hosting or what guests we have on, whether that be medical students or faculty or residents or different types of doctors.
Or my cat.
Or one of our wonderful cats. Yeah. But yeah, thank you for hanging out. Thank you for listening. Please let us know if you have anything else that you want us to include, not include. Any critiques or criticisms are welcome.
Yeah, if you think I have a lisp, let me know because I'm not sure if I do or don't.
And I've been really trying not to say or like, which is something that is
it's hard.
It's really difficult.
It's hard.
And you got to use that silence, as you said, instead of just filling the air with ums and likes. You know what we should
do? Let's count and see who said more likes.
With a little clicker?
Yeah, and we'll go back through, and then whoever, you guys might want to know the results of this, but the winner or the loser, the person who said more likes, the person who said more vocal fillers has to buy the other person lunch.
Okay. Panda Express.
No, chicken fingers at NSU.
Chicken fingers from Nova?
Yeah, that's the next podcast topic.
I did have those before the podcast, and they were wonderful.
They're better than Chick-fil-A.
Huh? Yeah, they're pretty good.
Yeah, they're good.
All right. Thank you, guys. That's it. Till next time.
Bye.
Bye. See ya.
Play out music. Play out music. This is the song that plays you out. This is the song to say goodbye. It's a podcast. We are med students.